Kia ora tātou. Kua hauwhai te kaumata I karaka te taima. Kua taima I koutou, nā ko tātou tēnei ka tīmata tātou, ne? Just one brief administrative issue. We are going to try and sit the time. So lunch is due at 1:15. So we will do panel session number 2 and panel session number 3 this session before lunch. So we will stick to that time frame. And then we'll break for lunch, and then after lunch, as you know, we have our keynote with Sir Ian Taylor. So let's rock into our next panel session now. And then after this panel session, we'll go back to our counting waiata āringa, number 5 and number 6. Okay, here we go. So with our next panel session, chaired by Ahorangi Professor Tim Naish, featuring Dr. Dan Hikuroa, Professor Rawinia Higgins, Nathan Hoturoa Gray, who I think has been beamed into us via video, and Nathalie Whitaker, to introduce the chair of this next session. He is a professor in earth sciences at the Antarctic Research Centre, Victoria University of Wellington, Te Herenga Waka Victoria University of Wellington, where he was director from 2008 to 2017. I think I heard tēnā koe from Professor Rawinia Higgins. His research focuses on past, present and future climate change, with specific emphasis on how the Antarctic ice sheets respond to climate change and influence global sea level. He is the leader of the New Zealand Antarctic Science Platform's Ice, Ocean and Atmosphere program, and co-leads the New Zealand Sea Rise program, improving location-specific projections of sea level rise. He and his Melting Ice and Rising Seas team were awarded the 2019 New Zealand Prime Minister's Science Prize. So would you please welcome the chair for this session, Destination Our Planet, How Do We Become Stewards of Sustainability and Intergenerational Wellbeing. Please welcome the chair to introduce the speakers, Professor Tim Naish. Tim, tēnā koe.
Morena koutou. Ngā mihi, Julian. Tēnā koutou I rau e rangatira ko Tim Naish toku ingoa, kia ora koutou katoa. As Julian introduced me, I'm a professor at Heringa Waka Victoria University in Earth Sciences. It's an absolute privilege and a pleasure to chair this session on Kaitiaki as protectors and stewards of our intergenerational well-being. It goes without saying that one of the most pressing international issues of our time is climate change, which affects us all, but especially people living in small islands in developing nations. These are the so-called SIDS. Aotearoa, New Zealand, while not a developing nation, is of course a series of small islands with extensive coastlines, and together with the South Pacific faces the existential threat of climate change, which none of us are properly prepared for. I'm a climate change researcher, as introduced, with a passion to help Aotearoa New Zealand anticipate, manage and adapt to climate change, and the climate change that we can no longer avoid that's already baked into the system. I have to say I feel a little bit intimidated and unqualified up here to be talking about Kaitiakitanga, and particularly, I guess, in the company of these very esteemed speakers. I am, though, abundantly aware that Māori values are intrinsic to the sort of values we as Pākehā and New Zealanders are going to have to adopt if we're going to get on top of this climate crisis. An intergenerational perspective is absolutely critical, as the commitments we need to make right now concerning global emissions reductions will determine our climate, the shape of our coastlines, and define our communities and cities for centuries to come. So on that uplifting note, let me introduce our inspirational speakers. And as I introduce you, two are on Zoom or pre-recorded, but as I introduce you, please come up and sit on the stage. So our first speaker is Dr. Dan Hikuroa, and of course is UNESCO New Zealand Culture Commissioner, Senior Lecturer, University of Auckland. He whakapapas te Ngāti Maniapoto, Waikato Tainui, Ngāti Whananga and Pakeha. Dan will zoom in today and he will talk about being a good ancestor, discussing Kaitiakitanga, the worldview from which it operates and the principles and practices we undertake to achieve it. Nathalie Whitaker is co-founder and CEO of Toha Foundry Impact Investment. She is a technology designer that believes in the potential of markets to deliver social and environmental impact. She is one of the 3 co-founders of Toha. It's a system to get scale finance to the front line of climate and environmental solutions. Nathalie will speak on the need for trust, diversity of partnerships, and incentives to achieve Kaitiakitanga at scale under urgency. Our next speaker will be my colleague, Professor Rawinia Higgins. She is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Māori at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University. She is a member of the Waitangi Tribunal, a board member of Nai Pai o Te Maramatanga Centre of Research Excellence, which she chairs, and a Māori Language Commissioner. Professor Higgins will discuss the exciting Living Pa building that's being developed at Te Herenga Waka on the marae, that aims to engage students, staff and communities, not only to understand the problem of climate change and sustainability, but to help develop those solutions we're all going to need for a better future. And then finally, our fourth speaker, last but not least, is Nathan Hoturoa Gray. He is a best-selling penguin author. No, he's not a penguin author. The books are published by Penguin, and he is a freelance adventure journalist with National Geographic. He whakapapas te Ngāi Tahu Rangatani Waikato. He will talk about climate change as a catalyst for advancing Indigenous rights and outlines an Indigenous framework to address climate change mitigation issues into the 21st century. So I'm hoping the technology won't let us down and we will have Dan Hikuroa on the screen any moment now. There he is. Kia ora, Dan.
Mihi o te rangi kia koutou katoa. E hui mai nei a kei te tūranga nui a kiwa. Sorry whānau, COVID's entered our kāinga and so I'm unable to be with you today. But I'm able to record this for you while I can't be there. So as we navigate the stormy world and start to consider some Māori values in foreign policy, I'm going to jump straight to my punchline. Be a good ancestor. Now, being a good ancestor is the key message that I hope we'll get to in the next few minutes. One of the things I think that Māoridom possess, our superpower, if you will, is our ability to form relationships. It seems that it's just hardwired in us somehow that we can get together, meet people, create really strong, reciprocal, trusting relationships. I think one of the fundamental aspects that enables us to be able to do that so well is whakapapa. Now, whakapapa is a term that many of you will be familiar with, and maybe it's new to some. And while it's true that whakapapa does mean lineage, families, it's also about networks of lineages. So it's not just about layers and layers and layers, it's about those interlinked networks of layers. And it's even more than that again. It's not just about people, it's about everything we see on this earth around us. And so whakapapa is a relational way of seeing the world. It's a way of making sense and explaining the world, in which kinship-based ideas of cosmos, oceans, rivers, landscapes, people, and other life forms is indivisible from each other, and they fashion distinctive relationships to place, explicitly emphasising humans as part of living systems. And so I think that's one of the key aspects of whakapapa that's not widely understood, outside of Māoridom, and definitely maybe not widely understood as we start to consider our foreign policies. And so when I get to my punchline about being a good ancestor, if we are related to not only everyone in this room, but the forests, the trees, the oceans, the fish, the birds, the living systems, and even the non-living things, to rocks, to mountains, to rivers. In fact, New Zealand, it made worldwide news by giving Māori ideas of landscape and parts of landscapes into our legal systems. And I believe that all of those amount to about being a good ancestor. Whakapapa is about the past, informing the present, and looking to the future. So every single person is simultaneously the past, the present, and the future. And if we want to be good ancestors, we need to start thinking about what our responsibilities are in order that we can be seen by our offspring, by our uri, as good ancestors. So, whānau, I wish you the best for the rest of the day. I look forward to seeing the recording of the day in the fullness of time. Nō reira, kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Kia ora, Dan. That was short and to the point. Thank you very much. Which brings us to our next speaker, Professor Rawinia Higgins.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Nā runga no i te poto te wā me poto te kakau o taku mihi. Engari, he mihi nui ki a koutou. Te whānau apanui, tēnā rā te mihi atu ki a koutou. I kawe mai a koutou tamariki ki te ako i enei o ngā kaupapa. Kia whai ake i ngā kōrero a taua waiata hei o mō apanui. Ko hara mai ki te whāngai i tērā o ki a koutou tamariki. O tira, Ethan, nā mea tamariki kei konei tēnā koutou katoa. I am going to talk about this building, and it's just going to go round and round and round as I talk because I've only got a few short minutes. But just what everyone else has said around in terms of kaitiaki, particularly Dan and others who've mentioned kaitiaki before, Kaitiakitanga, along with the other tangas, as Ethan pointed out, is all part of this interest that people have currently in understanding how our perspectives as Te Ao Māori. As Zoolander would say, we're so hot right now. And part of it is people wanting to understand those tangas. And I personally often get hoha with tangas. When people talk about the tangas, it's less about the talking about the tangas, but actually demonstrating how to give effect to the tangas. And part of that is predicated on what Ethan had said. It is about the tangata. And it's not just about the tangas. So our whakatauki, and we have many, many whakatauki, but if ko papatuanuku te matua o te tangata, even if we take that, papatuanuku is the primal parent of all of us. And if we do not look after our primal parent, then, we risk our own whakapapa connections. And people have talked about whakapapa today, and all of that is tied into the solutions that we try to find. When we think about climate change, a lot of people just we identify the problem. We know it's coming. We talk about, the rising seas. We talk about carbon emissions, and we keep talking about it, and we keep circling the problem, but we don't always talk about what are the solutions. And part of it, kaitiakitanga, is when people think about kaitiakitanga, they often associate it with resources, whether the natural resources, environmental resources, rangi, papa, tangaroa, whoever you want to describe it, but actually kaitiakitanga is about people. And if we don't think about how we as people act and the actions that we do, then that has an impact on our environment. And so kaitiakitanga is, just because it's in the Resource Management Act, doesn't actually make it about resource management. It is actually about people management, and people management of our environment and our ancestors. When we talk about intergenerational I'm putting my Māori Language Commissioner's hat on, language planning. When you talk about intergenerational transmission of knowledge, you know, part of that is what we do today actually does impact on our grandchildren. As Dan said, be a good ancestor. Many iwi associate their long-term vision is not about them, not about the generation that they govern, it's actually about their grandchildren. My life-term goal of all the things that I've done in this world is actually to be a grandmother. But also to be a grandmother in a world that actually respects te reo, understands tikanga Māori, doesn't just say tangas, but actually lives tangas. And it's in that living. So the living building challenge that we're adopting as part of our redevelopment of Te Herenga Waka Marae is building on the foundations of the generation before us. Tahirani Moko Mead, Rika Broughton, Dr. Wiremu Parker, they came up with a vision to bring Māori together on a space in a mainstream university and to provide that space. And Te Herenga Waka Marae was established. We are building on their legacy and their vision to bring people together with the living pa, what we're calling the living pa, that's adopting the living building challenge. So those who have been to Tāneatua and seen the first living building there, it's a building, it's more than just a building. It's a building that follows all of these hard criteria that you have to demonstrate that you can produce water, clean water, that you can, that all your materials are non-toxic, that you can create energy, that you can demonstrate equity, happiness, health, all these performance criteria before you can say you're a living building. Now, in an urban site up on Kelbourne Parade, just up on the hill, it's a really hard space. We don't have the luxury of paddocks to clean water and et cetera, but what it will do, what we hope to do, using science and technology to try and bring mātauranga Māori to the fore on how do you teach people to give effect to Kaitiakitanga. In this building, we're quite excited about it. It's still being built, but it is around thinking about how do you teach the next generation. I'm at the university, we're teaching the next generation to think about their behaviours and attitudes towards Papatūānuku. This building helps force it, because if you run out of power, if you run out of water, then it's lights off and you're out. So how do you think about those without just thinking, oh, I'm just going to turn the tap on, I'm going to turn the switch on, if you haven't thought about how much consumption, how much use, whether it's being cleaned, whether we can look after our manuhiri. That's going to challenge us as a marae. We have to think about new tikanga of living inside this building. So Kaitiakitanga is around active change and active application of the tangas, so they're just not theoretical. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, Rawinia. Our next speaker is coming in on the big screen again, and that is Nathan Hoturoa Gray.
Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka, ka tangi hoki kua, ti hei mauri ora. Ko te mei tuatai o tō mātou atu I Rangarawa, tēnā koe. Ko Papatūānuku te kōtō nei, kei te mihi. E nā mate ku uehe ki te pō, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Me nā iwi ku huhu mai nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. On March 3rd, in the New South Wales township of Lismore, a 93-year-old woman found herself trapped on a mattress as record floodwaters swept into her home. Living in a natural floodplain, she had experienced rising floodwaters up to her front gate before, but nothing like this as the waters rose to within 20 centimetres of her ceiling. Heading towards imminent death, it was pure luck that a rescue boat heard her despairing cries, and a constable managed to enter the house through a window to heroically rescue her. Just picturing this biblical-like flood is disconcerting enough. Yet remember, it was only 2 years ago that approximately 46 million acres of forest fires swept through southeastern Australia, destroying over 8,000 buildings and tragically killing an estimated 1 billion wild animals. In fact, in the time that I will get through my speech, one more species will have become extinct as part of the 150 plus that we lose every day. The hottest ever temperature recorded in the southern hemisphere was in January this year, set at 50.7 degrees centigrade, or 123 degrees Fahrenheit, in the coastal town of Onslow in Western Australia. At 50 degrees Celsius, heat starts to become toxic. Human cells start to cook, blood thickens, muscles lock around the lungs, and the brain is choked of oxygen. The latest IPPA report stipulates that unless drastic measures are taken, our planet has already locked in a 1.5 degree increase. Even with current commitments stipulated in Glasgow's COP26 last year, we're still looking at a 2.3 degree temperature rise. Given that our species has done next to nothing since 1957, when oil and gas companies first became aware of the extreme temperature risks of fossil fuel-induced carbon emissions, I have minimal confidence in the political fulfillment of these commitments and can see our planet's climate rising 3 degrees. At 3 degrees, heat of over 60 degrees will be experienced in the Indian subcontinent, and there is nowhere on the planet where you can escape the most severe effects of global warming. So this now becomes everyone's problem. No political parties in New Zealand deny we have a climate crisis on our hands. Droughts in the far north, right down the Motu to the deep south, have led to unprecedented wetland fires destroying unique ecosystems and billions of dollars of loss to our agricultural economy. Significant flooding, pitched as 1 in 100-year events, have already occurred in Whangarei, the East Cape, Marlborough, Napier, Christchurch, Southland, Coromandel, Edgecombe, Westport, and even up the road in Plympton in just the last 5 years. Clearly, the time for talking is over. Action is all we have left. So what can we do? I advocate that the strongest way forward is an Indigenous framework of action. Indigenous growing techniques and sustainable management of our ecosystems over millennia provide vital pathways for humanity to better navigate mitigation measures to curb climate impacts. For example, Brazilian forests managed by Indigenous tribes have shown 27 times less emissions compared with regions outside their protected areas. Indigenous action can also mitigate food insecurity, as shown by Peruvian Indigenous communities tripling the cross-pollination of potatoes to over 650 native species following an Indigenous conference sharing planting and crossbreeding techniques despite the challenges of climate change. Forest biodiversity creates significant economic value, estimated at $150 trillion, in the form of carbon storage, food provisioning, and air and water filtration, which is approximately twice the planet's total GDP. The current decline in ecosystem functionality equates to $5 trillion annually in the form of lost natural ecosystem services. Given that Indigenous territories house up to 80% of the planet's biodiversity, their sovereignty over these lands must be protected, if anything, to retain vital carbon sinks and thriving ecosystems to balance out the ongoing destruction of colonisation. Thus, there is the call today for the immediate insertion of Indigenous worldviews into all environmental policy, and for tribal sovereignty and self-determination to be supported in all future climate change initiatives, especially where human relocation is involved. International legal instruments such as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRIP, need to be aggressively championed in domestic legal settings to enhance the rights of Indigenous communities and amplify their voice in governmental policy, co-governance, and judicial decision-making. Ideas that have already gained international prominence, like rights of nature advocacy that gives human legal personality to our rivers and forests, work spearheaded by Honourable Christopher Finlayson as Treaty Negotiations Minister over the 2017 Whanganui Awa and 2014 Tūhoe Ngāhere settlements. Thus, people could potentially become legally accountable for destroying the environment as one would were they to commit a crime against a human by civil or criminal law. The idea of corporate manslaughter or ecocide for environmental wrongs is undoubtedly worthy of greater academic and legal research, especially if environmental destruction impacts the health and livelihood of an Indigenous community who are reliant upon the land for survival and well-being. Work by the late great Moana Jackson, who spearheaded the drafting of UNDRIP, was working on his final project, Mātiki Mai, upon his passing. His team interviewed 4,000 Māori throughout the motu and received the strong and unified message that we need to have a Papatūānuku-centric basis to our constitution, the treaty principle of Kaitiakitanga. An Indigenous framework that respects Papatūānuku helps ensure the sustainability of our nation moving forward for us all. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa.
Yep, that's good. I hope you will be around on the Zoom for questions as well. Some very powerful and very true comments there. Our final speaker, and then we'll go to some questions, is Nathalie Whitaker.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Nathalie Whitaker. I was born here in Wellington. My whakapapa te kawhia on the west coast of the North Island, my iwi Ngāti Hikairo. For the last 3.5 years I've been based on the east coast in Te Tairāwhiti, a place which is helping me to do my work, to better understand the real world trust and partnerships necessary for urgent climate action. I'm a technology designer. I like the challenge of redesigning digital markets to reveal our most sacred individual values, to help us trust each other, to mobilise crowds for the highest collective ideals we can express, and to support one another and get more involved in civic life. It's great to follow the first session today, the Manaaki session. The first digital marketplace I built was centred around Manaakitanga. I'm the founder of givealittle.co.nz. I ran that for 8 years. And from this experience, I learnt a lot about how New Zealanders come together to trust one another at times of great need. After finishing up working on Give a Little, the next digital platform I built was called Trees That Count. I was asked to build that for Sir Stephen Tindall to help him realise his dream of millions more native trees for New Zealand and to help scale up the charity project Crimson. This was my first personal stepping stone towards a greater awareness of the climate and biodiversity crisis that we face. So 3.5 years ago, I left my home in Ponsonby and moved to Gisborne in an attempt to more deeply connect with a community that is in partnership with the land and with the sea for its economic prosperity. To design a marketplace for climate and nature, I knew I needed to immerse myself in a community that lives and breathes Kaitiakitanga every day. Here are some of the things that I've learnt so far on this journey. The biodiversity crisis goes hand in hand with the climate crisis. Carbon and biodiversity are partners. Nature-based solutions for climate will provide us with the resilience we need. We'll get our carbon sequestration, we'll clean up our fresh water, we'll preserve and protect our biodiversity, and we'll make our food system resilient. As Nathan was saying, 80% of the world's surviving biodiversity today is located within lands and oceans stewarded by Indigenous peoples. We cannot reach net zero without a revolution of Kaitiakitanga to reverse nature loss, but this revolution is going to require trust and partnership. And that's trust today, as you all know, which is breaking down pretty quickly. But can we turn it around? At Toha, we believe that it is possible to regenerate nature, but we'll also have to regenerate trust and constantly remind ourselves of how we do partnership here in Aotearoa. In the traditional economy, the one we have today, trust is metered top-down, it's centralised and it's monopolised by large entities like corporates, governments, standard setters. And they leverage their influence and reputation to provide assurance to markets at a premium. Everything costs if it's going to be high trust. To grow an economy for climate and for nature, we need the opposite. We need high trust, science-backed measurement, but at the front line, where the actions and the outcomes, the Kaitiakitanga, is happening at scale and at low cost. Today, the transaction cost for making investments in small frontline actions and outcomes is too prohibitive if you're relying on the old system. As a consequence, the small-scale actions that we could be doing today right across our land are isolated and disconnected from the global capital that sits waiting to invest in climate solutions. Without the scale to coordinate the trillions of dollars that now needs to move for climate action, and without the incentives for frontline action, we just simply cannot mobilise our capacity for Kaitiakitanga. We have to make choices about where we spend our time, and it's about time we valued the work of Kaitiakitanga. Climate justice is central to widespread trust and cooperation. It makes it very perilous to just be relying on large, powerful incumbent interests to just accept the national and international regulations that will probably never come. So we believe we need a regenerative revolution to turn around climate change and reverse the biodiversity collapse. This scale of action cannot advance without radical trust and partnership. The scale of coordination required, they say, is going to be bigger than any wartime effort of the past. It feels frightening. McKinsey is saying that we require around $9 trillion worth of investment per year for the next 3 decades in energy and land use transition. It's phenomenal. The scale of the effort cannot be optimised if it's not guided by really high trust markets. Markets that we self-regulate from the bottom up, but that have oversight by democratic governments. The challenge, though, is to recreate these new markets, not like the old ones, but give them the ability to understand the complexity of nature and to reflect the needs of frontline communities. We need to have high levels of transparency, not like we have today, where greenwashing is a big problem. And we need incentives to be aligned with real-world results that we can measure. To establish these impact markets, we're going to need innovation that respects Indigenous wisdom while embracing traditional science. We'll then need seamless cooperation between public finance and private capital. So what are we building in Toha? Well, the short answer is a lot, but we're not doing it alone. At its core, Toha is a distributed verification system for climate and environmental solutions. You may have heard of the saying, trust but verify. That's where we're at today. We believe we can lower transaction costs for frontline measurement by mobilising an efficient network of kaitiaki that share observations, measure actions and outcomes, and provide collective assurance over our shared interests in nature and in environmental commons. We're building an economic network founded on Kaitiakitanga. It feels like a big undertaking, and it is, but to have a shot at averting the climate crisis, it is necessary for hundreds of teams like ours in Toha to be organising and building systems and infrastructure like we are. We're anticipating sustained economic instability as collective awareness for the climate crisis grows. We believe that the data about the state of our natural ecosystems will become critical national assets and infrastructure. We expect that government will need to partner with communities in order to get visibility to our ecosystems. Sure, we have the satellites, but Kaitiakitanga is about action, and it's about choices, behaviour and leadership. At a grassroots level, the satellites can't pick that up. So I believe that with new forms of trust and partnership and low transaction costs, we can work together to grow a more impact-focused economy. We're feeling pretty hopeful that we can do this within Toha. We've got great examples of dairy farmers going to regenerative practices, sheep and beef farmers bringing back the Indigenous forest, and evidence that Māori land blocks that have been naturally reverting for years will be able to see new value for the very first time. Just to close, I'd just like to say that it is easy to feel overwhelmed by the complexity of the systems transformation we face if we're going to face up to climate and our nature challenges. But what I love about returning to our Māori values is that there couldn't really be anything simpler than being a guardian for your home and the home you share with the people you love, just to be a steward of our beautiful environment. Thank you.
Kia ora, Nathalie. Wow. Great talks all morning so far. So a big mihi to our speakers on this panel. We're going to have some questions from the audience, but both Dan and Nathan unfortunately can't participate, so puts you two in the hot seat even more, and potentially myself. But just to summarise, some of the things that resonated with me. Dan talked about whakapapa, of being a good ancestor, of how traditional knowledge and Māori values need to be used. Ra talked about the really teaching and living the tangas, and this incredible living pā, marae at Te Herenga Waka, where students will be able to learn how to do that and experience that. Nathan was a bit of a downer, I have to say, but he was a realist of how urgent and serious this problem is. That the Australians have a new colour on their weather map for 50 degrees. He reinforced 1.5 is pretty much gone, and we're heading towards 3 degrees. He talked about urgent action, and he talked about the role of Indigenous approaches in mitigation, natural and nature-based solutions and sinks. And he mentioned that word corporate manslaughter, which is an interesting concept, isn't it? And then finally, Nathalie really brought a dose of reality to Kaitiakitanga. $9 trillion. Is that what you said? Something like $9 trillion is needed. So talk is cheap, and we've got to get on with this. And so she's in the game, of course, of bringing much needed capital to solve the climate and sustainability problem. And I think she made an important point that resonated with me, is biodiversity and the climate crisis really go hand in hand. We can't separate them. To solve one, we need to solve them both. So, on that little wrap-up summary, I open the floor to some questions to our speakers. Wow. You're not going to put me in the hot seat to ask the question. There must be a burning... There we go. Nancy.
Kia ora. What an amazing group of people to summarise such a complex issue. One thing that struck me is that we have to learn so much to do things differently and in a new way, but also we have great urgency. How do we combine those two conflicting priorities?
Tēnā koe. It's always a hard one when you're trying to do intergenerational change, because of course if I think about language revitalisation, it takes one generation to lose a language, it takes 3 to restore it. And for many of us in Māori communities, the impact of colonisation has had a severe and dire outlook for many whānau. And so often when you can't feel or see the change, it makes it really hard to believe that it's going to happen. But I think as we celebrate 50 years of the Māori language petition by a generation who were the first of the generation of the urban migration, who had no language, who had no access to culture, who weren't raised in traditional forms of knowledge, but they truly believed that they needed to make that change. And so 50 years on, where we have many people using Te Reo Māori and Te Reo Māori becoming more and more of a feature of this country, I feel like this is this is where we have to start now. If we don't, address the behaviours and attitudes and challenge the generations today to be better ancestors, as Dan said, then, it just makes it longer and longer. So that's kind of, I started for 10 and wish Dan was here and Nathan, so they could answer these.
Maybe just something to add when it comes to the scale and the urgency. What we've been doing in Toha is focusing on the nature of the work required and making sure that we know how to value it. We have time. We just don't spend our time looking after nature. And if we could make different decisions about where we put our time between 9 to 5, what we do on the weekends, and if we could stop relegating the work of conservation and looking after our environment to volunteerism, then we may have a shot. And that requires that we know how to value and pay for the work that needs to happen. So a big part of what we're doing is working out how to build the system that enables people to have well-paid work and livelihoods doing the work of kaitiaki.
Question? I'll take your question first. Yeah. And there's a microphone.
Kia ora. Tēnā korua, ngā mihi nui mō tō kōrero. Really awesome to hear from you both in the Zoomies. My pātai is for Rawinia. You spoke a little bit about it just then, but interested to hear more about the intersect between your mahi with the living pā and, I guess, with your Te Tairowhiri hat about language and kind of cultural revitalisation, and how that kind of intersects and how you see having spaces like that, being able to contribute to that. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe. So I do wear many hats, and most of those hats do overlap just by being Māori, but I don't see them as being separate. So the things that I do for the Commission, the things I do for the university, for the tribunal, it all helps to contribute to some of that systemic change that's needed in terms of the understanding around action. So not just seeing one of my kaupapa or research expertise as being only the outcome being for that specific area, such as language revitalisation. But actually language revitalisation is around Kaitiakitanga in terms of how we raise the next generation as language speakers, but to fully understand what does it mean to be Kaitiaki in that space. So whether it's in the tribunal, whether it's at the university, this is where part for me, I'm inspired by the vision of those elders such as Tahirani Moko Mead and Whatarangi Winiata particularly, and for those who are not aware, Professor Whatarangi Winiata was the first one to create a language strategy for his whole iwi, where whakatupuranga rua mano was inspired for its time, that by generation 2000 they would have grown language speakers, but also a community that centred their own identity. And we have Te Wānanga or Raukawa situated in Otaki, and Otaki very much a very bilingual community. So I think, believing in those aspirations, having those bigger dreams, but working towards the outcomes rather than just focusing on one thing, because language contributes to culture and of course to who we are in our identity. For the living pā, one of the things that we take for granted as Māori is not all Māori know what it means to be Māori. When you've been part of a generation that's been denied access to your identity, often what we find, particularly at Te Herenga Waka, is many students, Māori students, turn up on day one without any sense of knowing who they are. And so the marae, because it's non-iwi specific, it's around all waka coming together, this becomes a watershed moment in their lives. We definitely have pā kids who just live and breathe being Māori, but we also have tamariki who turn up who are trying to break the cycle of colonisation in their families. So that inherited trauma of being Māori, we know that it takes huge courage to open the door and want to connect and learn about your own identity. Education, getting degrees, that's one thing, but actually learning about yourself, that's really hard for many of them who've been denied access to that. So yeah, I feel like I've probably over-answered your question.
No, it's great.
Natalie's got cooler things to say than that.
I've got one at the back, but I'll go just to the front here first, and then...
Kia ora. New Zealand has sometimes been termed the fastest legislators in the West, but in terms of climate action, it seems to move really, really slowly. And so this question is to all the panellists. So if you could adjust or change our political or constitutional arrangements today, what would you do to better allow us to address the climate crisis and particularly to accelerate political action at that level?
I'd probably just start pegging legislation to temperature. No, I think we just have to work out how to stay in constant dialogue and show compassion through our legislation for the enormous amount of change and economic transition that's required. And we just need to start signalling quite overtly to many industries who are going to face very, very tough transitions that we intend to support everybody through this. It's not going to work if we take sides. And so I would be focused not so much on the pace and speed of the regulation or the legislation. I'd just be focusing on what big signals we could send that we intend to keep ourselves together as a nation as we chart this path forward.
So I totally agree, and I think one of the things that we have to remember around legislation and regulations and stuff like that, they're made by people. And until we speak up and talk about, what we can do, then what we should be doing, that's how we kind of get legislation change and regulation change, until it becomes part of our discourse. So one of the things that we often find where we identify climate change as, this huge problem, people just get overwhelmed by it and just think, oh, it's probably not going to happen or not happen in my lifetime. I'll let the next generation deal with it. And until we recognise that we actually have to take action, like Kaitiakitanga is about action, and change our behaviours and start talking that kind of talk, then we don't want to just be virtue signalling. And I think that's what often happens, because until the people speak and say this is not acceptable, then those kind of legislations and regulations don't happen. But it's a challenge. I find the challenge with the living pā, the way the university creates its funding system for capital works is that, part of it is funded by the university and then we have to fundraise for it. I can tell you now, when you're trying to fundraise for a marae that is an active marae, but because it's part of in the mainstream institution, I don't qualify for money in the Māori space, I don't qualify for money in the sustainability space, because someone else is thinking someone else is taking care of the problem. Because we're not having joined up conversations around what is the outcome we're trying to get from these sort of stuff. It's a challenge, but until the people start speaking, then that's what Kaitiakitanga is about, is the actions of the people, not just the person.
Kia ora. Question over here on the left, and then we'll go down the back.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko Liz Ramaswala Ho, and I'm from Ngāti Kāngunu country, Te Mata a Māui. A really, really powerful session today, thank you so much. And I studied Te Reo Māori in 1980 at Te Herenga Waka with Professor Mead. And my daughter speaks Te Reo fluently, and I'm looking forward to being a grandmother as well. I really want to, the link with Kaitiakitanga about resourcing, and I've worked for a long time in the environmental space, in local government space, and it's about where we put our resources, and if we really put the resources in the things that we need, we could do it. But right now we're experiencing what looks like a third world war, and we're increasing our military spending, and we're going to the other side of the world and supporting this massive war of nuclear powers, as well as watching expansion into the Pacific space of a whole lot of military exercises such as RIMPAC in Hawaiian waters. How, I suppose, Nathalie, you've worked with a lot of people and engaged hearts and minds. How do we actually convert doing the mahi that is needed so that we do this resourcing and that we're not just, diplomacy, using non-violent ways to deal with conflict, really values that are resonant with the future of our people and becoming good ancestors? Thank you.
That's a very big question. Thank you. Our journey to build Toha really started with a deep analysis of the foundations of our economy, and a desire to understand why it is that our financial markets do not value the environment, do not value nature. And our conclusion and our theory now is that the reason why we see our financial markets behave in an extractive and destructive way towards nature is that basically the markets can't see nature. We don't know how to account for it. We don't have the hundreds of years of legal and accounting norms that have evolved over time that have allowed us to basically build institutions and assets and value and drive everything in the way that we see it being driven today. I think this is a problem of measurement and then the courage to assign value. And once that process starts, once we're building better financial products, better organisations that are accounting for their value in more diverse ways than just financial performance, once that meets the regulation and the disclosure and reporting for a new world of consumers who expect things to look different, a new generation of people who want to do more impactful work, then we will start to see the change. But it does come down to valuing the work and valuing the actions, and so the systems have to be flexible enough to provide a high degree of trust over the work that we do at the front line, and it's from that place that we're able to start to see much larger systems change.
Thank you, Nathalie. And down the back.
Kai te rarangi tangata, a matanga o te ao tūroa nei, mihi atua na kai taku tuahine, ka mihi o tino kuruatahi koutou katoa. Te rā no ngā pātai, ngā kōrero I rānguna I a kōrua, ka puta, no reire kimi whakaroa na I tētehi ka tino taumai kia au nei, ko te I roto I te rā nei ka rongo I e tehi ka whakamahia mai, ngā kupu, ngā mātāpono ki te ao tauiwi. Ka rongo I te rā momo kōrero, wairua nei puta mai o konei, ko tāku e pātai atuana, kai te tika pē tēnā ahunga mai o te whakaro, wai te ao Māori ki te ao tauiwi, huri rānei. Ko ia he taku pātai. Just to acknowledge our panel for their wisdom and providing some insight on how we're addressing or should be thinking about these things that are challenging us today around the nature, papatuanuku, our war tumatauenga, its relevancy in the way we give effort towards a conscious acknowledgement on how do we give effect to the values that we talk about and how we weave it, as I've heard one of the sentences used this morning, weave it into our everyday work. My question, just one of the things I saw here was the markets can't see nature. Love that saying. And we assign a value. So around that, my question is on your thoughts around some of the conversations that have been shared today around, is that a correct way to think about how we give thought to a cultural understanding of our old people and assigning it, or levelling it up against what we do in today's society, whatever mahi that is, or should it be, when we're giving consideration about tomorrow and the way we're trying to drive our work, should it come from an understanding of our cultural values first before we even start thinking about work? Koia pē taku pātai.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is that the work that we need to do today will bring forward, I guess, resilience in the future. And we need to work out how to bring forward some of that value so that we can start to see the incentives and change in how we're operating today. Because this really is a very dire and urgent situation that we face. We're very, very, very careful in Toha to ensure that the work that we're doing is not about placing or assigning value to nature itself. It's about valuing the work to regenerate nature. And that's a very, very important distinction, because as Māori we know that this nature is sacred. We are part of it. But it's not our job to assign a financial value to nature as an asset. It's our job to I guess measure and record and account for the work that people put in to bringing it back to what it was.
Kei te tūnane mohi, tēnā koe me tō pātai. Hoi anō, pēnā ka whai au i te wairua o tō patapatai mo te āhuatanga o ngā mātāpono nei. I runga anō i ngā kōrero hia i te ata nei. Kei te tika hoki pēr tāhau, he pai ake te me tīmata i roto i te reo me te ao no tātou nei i ngā tikanga. Ka ahu pēhea ki mua ki a tātou i tēnei rā. I think just one of the things in terms of the kaupapa we've been talking about today, and just some of the themes that have come out in the question time from this session and the previous one, it is around, you know, how do we actually give effect and not just talk about tangas, but actually how do we make sure that they come from that space of, you know, what they were intended to be. We can assign different, like Kaitiakitanga and Manakitanga, and we capture it in different kinds of ways. But the big part of understanding all of the tangas is the context in which we're using it. And it's not just one way to look at it. All of those tangas have multiple dimensions depending on the context. And as we think about, you know, climate change is quite a huge kaupapa, is how do we ensure that in the different approaches to that? Because we continue to circle the problem, but actually what are the actions that we need to do? And it takes a multiple number of layers of tangas. It's not just Kaitiakitanga, that's one part of it, but it's how we manaki each other, the whanaunatanga that we have amongst us to ensure that the resources that we've been charged with looking after, you know, is shared, but is also cared for in that kind of way. So I think there's much to be learned. One of the things I think from a Te Ao Māori perspective, you know, it's incumbent on us to take a leadership role in climate change, because we have nowhere else to go as Māori. As much as Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, our Pacific Island, relations, who else, apart from us, Indigenous people, cares more about the place that we come from? And if we don't take charge of that, then, we've got nowhere else to go. Other people have places to go. But, take no konei tātou. So we have to step up. We have to embrace our rangatiratanga and be good kaitiaki.
Great. Thank you. We'll take one last question, Jifwa, in the centre there. And then I'll hand over to Julian and we'll thank the speakers.
Kia ora. My pātai is we currently live in an extractive economy, which has nothing to do with Kaitiakitanga, and that therefore means we're in a real disruption in the space, especially the agriculture space and the transport space. At a Hikuroa with Mike Smith around his wakaaro of literally abolishing farming and how the transport in the future will look totally different. That's in 5-10 years' time. So my pātai is around how do we prepare ourselves, especially rangatahi, for what the future will look like, because right now we're not living kaitiakitanga and we need essentially a whole systemic change around the way we live.
I love Mike. But I'm not sure we get too far abolishing farming. We need everything is food. But I think food provides us with a really helpful, practical anchor into this crisis and challenge that we face. Not only is it relevant for the short-term challenges that we're facing today with the disruption in global supply chains and uncertainty with conflict abroad. But the more we can focus on our ability to localize our food system and bring resilience to the supply chains, but also critically become more conscious of the impact of that food production on our natural resources, the more we bring into daily life what kaitiakitanga really kind of means, I think, in everyday life, and it's about understanding the connection between us, our food, and nature. So that's what I would say.
And just that's part of the mission of the Living Park, is to build those spaces, to have those conversations, to see it kind of right there. It's been an interesting conversation in the development of the building, where we think about tikanga and we think about things like kai, where we're so used to just buying in heaps of kai and manaki everybody and, manaki our people to an unhealthy lifestyle. But also in a living building, how do you think about, the whakapapa of that food and where it came from and things like that? It's a very interesting conversation to have with the people who've been the hapai o in your wharekai, to say, whānau, we're going to be in a living building. That means we have to start thinking about the type of kai we give to our manuhiri. And, when you normally just give lots of pork and fried food and all the bits that you want, but actually, can we still do that? And so it's having those conversations. We don't have enough of those conversations and create spaces for those conversations to be had, so we can start thinking about what kind of tikanga we want to live in the future.
Great. Thank you so much to all four of our wonderful speakers. Big mihi to you for fronting the questions on your own, which are really great kōrero. So thank you all, and I'll hand over to Julian if we could just thank the speakers.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you again to the speakers, particularly to Rawinia and Nathalie, for fronting for the panel of four Ngā mihi nui kia kōrua, Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. We have one more session before our lunch break, which again we're hoping will start Oh, actually might be about 5 minutes late, hey? We might go at about 1:20 for lunch. We'll see how we go with the next panel. Ka mai. So before we introduce the next panel, I said we'd do numbers 5 and 6. E tu? Now remember, 1 is the slap, so we go. Tahi, tahi, rua, tahi, left or right, tahi, rua, toru. Now right. Tahi, rua, toru, fa, toru, rua. Who's clapping? Clap on 2, not 4. Okay. Rima is here. Like a Aussie rules. What a dumb game that is, eh, Aussie? Anyway. Welcome to the Australians in the crowd, by the way. So Rima is here. So we go tahi, rua, toru, fa, Rima, fa, toru, rua, tahi. These are good dance moves too. So Rima, and then ono is ono. Alright? Let's go up to ono. Tahi, rua, toru, fa, Rima, ono, Rima, fa, toru, rua. And feel free to, lift ono. Ka. So we'll do it one more time up to ono. Tahi, rua, toru, fa, Rima, ono, Rima, fa, toru, rua. Right, so we're going to start. This is how you start. This is I will go te ringa whakarongo, and you will go o. Te ringa whakarongo, toru, fa, tahi, tahi, rua, tahi, tahi, rua, toru, rua, tahi, fa, tahi, rua, toru, fa, toru, rua, tahi, rua, toru, fa, Rima, fa, toru, ono, tahi, rua, toru, fa, Rima, ono, Rima, fa, toru, rua. Pakuka, te ringa whakarongo, toru, fa, tahi, tahi, rua, tahi, tahi, rua, toru, rua, fa, tahi, rua, toru, fa, toru, Rima, tahi, rua, toru, fa, Rima, fa, toru, ono, tahi, rua, toru, fa, Rima, ono, Rima, fa, toru. Pakuka, te ringa whakarongo, toru, fa, tahi, tahi, rua, tahi, tahi, rua, toru, rua, fa, toru, Rima, tahi, rua, toru, fa, Rima, fa, toru, ono. Come on, ano. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is inspired by the previous panel that talked about action. Action. Create space for conversations, not just about the tangas, it's the tangata in the tangas and the tangata taking action with the tangas. Ka pai? Our next panel session, e te tiro atu ana, ki ngā whetū e kōrako mai ana i te rangi. Ara ka whaiwhai ake pēr i amatariki a puanga i are hua i e rā mahi katoa i o tia tatau I roto i ngā rā pūkua pahure tata kenei ko te mātahi o te tau Māori. Session 3, Destination in the Stars, Trade, Tech and Success. We have a wonderful panel again to present to you. The chair, He Uri no Waikato, Waikato horo pounamu, Waikato tani wharau, he piko, he taniwha, he piko, he taniwha. She is the co-founder and CEO of The Granary, a virtual production studio. She is the creative producer with a career that spans over 2 decades in the film and tech industry with extensive experience across all facets from script development, production, post-production through to VFX. She is passionate about empowering creativity through technology, and she is working on a slate of multimedia projects currently exploring themes of connection that celebrates diversity through narrative, Indigenous character-driven stories, and she has led integral technical departments at one of the world's most renowned VFX companies, where she was responsible for the utilisation of APAC region's largest privately held data centre, and has over 100 projects to her name, which include Academy Award-winning features, Emmy Award-winning episodic series, industry-acclaimed interactive projects, as well as independent and local productions. Wow. This is awesome, man. Jeez, these people are too much, eh? She is a committee member and chair of multiple film, VFX, and gaming diversity and inclusion initiatives, committees, and guilds. This is awesome. So to welcome our next panel, would you please welcome the chair, Amber Marie Naveira. Amber, tēnā koe. Pamai te pakipaki.
Kia ora. Kia ora e te whānau. Manawatia Matariki. Kia ora. Oh, that was awesome. You did a better job than I'll probably do. So kia ora. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Waikato tani whāro, he piko he tani whā, he piko he tani whā. Ko tainui toko waka, ko waikato toko awa. Ko taupiri toko manga, ko waikato tainui toko iwi. Ko te wherewhere te tangata. Ko Amber Māori toko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So kia ora. Kia ora e te whānau. I'm Amber Māori. I am of the four winds. I am a builder of worlds. I am Wahine Māori, and I'm the chair for the next hour. I would like to acknowledge tangata whenua te Atiawa as I stand here. Ngā mihi for your generous welcome. And ngā mihi nui to our Diplosphere organisers and sponsors, and kia ora to our dignitaries joining us today. It's an honour to stand here with you. Having immersed myself in this morning's kōrero, I'm incredibly motivated and excited as we move forward, especially around a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. Our discussion for this next hour will cover areas of trade, technology, and success. Our destination is the stars, and I will be joined today by these incredible mana whirltane and my hope one mana wahine via video, but I've also been told that potentially I'll have a little kōrero at the end of this, as we may not be able to get that in time. So Māori have a long history in trade. Before European settlement in Aotearoa, we ran small enterprises, had well-established bartering systems and regular trading patterns. Following European settlement, Māori switched our focus away from trading amongst ourselves to forging business associations with new settlers, extending to developing business relationships internationally. The future is Māori. Burl partnered with Te Pūtea Mātua, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, to produce the Tiohanga Māori 2018 report. The Māori economy is valued at around $70 billion and is a critical contributor to New Zealand's trade and economic well-being. But what does the Māori economy mean for Aotearoa, and where next as we move forward as a nation? What about our international trade partners? How has the Māori relationship with Asia and China evolved, and what can we learn with the Te Ao Māori framework? There is a global opportunity within the content creation space with larger audiences than ever and platforms hungry to create new and original content. The screen industry, and in particular the gaming sector, is set to grow to $260 billion by 2025. What does Māori success in the tech world look like, especially with digital exports value continuing to rise? Innovation is critical to the future well-being of society and to driving economic growth. Who are the stars of today and tomorrow? Where do we see our Māori entrepreneurs and businesses thriving as we move into a technologically driven future? Before we dive right in, I am the CEO and co-founder of The Granary, a creative tech R&D startup studio. We specialise in leveraging disruptive production technologies to innovate the screen industry and create opportunities in the converging creative tech sector here in Aotearoa with a global goal. We are invested in the next evolution of content creation and in leading the developing convergence of filmmaking and game engine technology. We are building real-time AI creative workflows, technology and tooling, which will fundamentally disrupt the traditional ways content has been produced. I am a creative producer with a career that spans over 2 decades in the film and tech industry. I am passionate about empowering creativity through technology. Now, we are all here to hear from these amazing mana tangata, so please, come on, welcome you in. Kia ora. So right here, to my immediate right, we have the very awesome Shane Tracy O'Connell, who he himself was a fellow Māori founder. He's been amplified through his work with AWS. Shane's passions lie within community, Māori entrepreneurship, and startups, with a particular fondness for emerging technologies. Next, we have the mighty Paul Conway, Chief Economist of the Reserve Bank. Paul's experience is extensive, having previously worked at the OECD and the World Bank. Paul joined the Reserve Bank this year from BNZ. We had been Chief Economist as well. And then finally, we have the transformative Rob Fisher. He is the lead partner for transformation and board member of PwC Aotearoa. Rob co-founded a technology startup focused on delivering specialist services in automation and digital transformation. After achieving rapid growth, awards, and recognition for service excellence, Rob's business was acquired by one of the world's top 50 brands to embed their services within a global network of 250,000 staff. And finally, I would like to acknowledge her, so our mana wahine, Tanya Te Whenua, who we may be hearing from, so of course I'm looking out for that. Unfortunately, her flight from Tamaki Makaurau experienced engineering issues this morning and was cancelled last minute. I'm going to leave the space open just in case, but I wish to acknowledge Tanya. She is the principal of Te Whenua Law and Consulting, supporting organisations and the Crown to uphold the principles of Te Tiri o Waitangi. Tanya holds multiple board positions, including Te Taumata, the Māori International Trade Advisory Board to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade. She is also the NZ lead for IndigiX, an Indigenous Leaders Exchange program between New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and the Pacific. So we have welcomed this year for the first time as a nation the acknowledgement of Matariki. Matariki is a time for us to celebrate new life, to remember those who have passed and gone before us, as well as a time to plan and prepare for the future. As we enter this new year, and this session's kōrero, I encourage us all to pause, refresh our minds and spirits as we look to the future for our nation. We will welcome to the podium these incredible voices, and then we will open to the floor for kōrero, connection, and pātai. Tihei mauri ora. Kia ora. So please join me in welcoming to the podium Shane Tracy O'Connell. Kia ora. Take this, my friend. I'm in your way.
Kia ora, Amber. Ina mana, ina waka, ina reo, I rau rangatira mā. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko moiho no maunga, ko waiho te awa, ko tainui te waka, ko Ngāti Maru hauraki te iwi, ko Shane Tracy O'Connell taku ingoa, ko takumahi ki AWS ko te startups team. Ka mihi atu, ka mihi atu, ka mihi atu. Kia ora everyone. My name's Shane Tracy O'Connell and I'm stoked to be on the stage today with some truly inspiring speakers. I'm born in Southland, but I whakapapa back to Tainui Coromandel through my mum's side, the Tuki whānau. And this is the land in which we identify with, and my family have some ownership in. It's pure native bush, and Doc take care of everything. In 2012, I was a student sitting in a computer science lab at Auckland University. A recent extracurricular activity, next slide please. And you might need to hit play on it too. Sorry, the one after this. An extracurricular activity that I had started with a few friends was gaining momentum. We were organising high-pressure coding competitions for developers and selling tickets to spectators. The first event had over 200 people. Picture that scene in the movie The Social Network where people are hacking to try and get roles at Facebook while doing shots of tequila. Or in this case, it's a bank heist-themed challenge where competitors needed to hack into virtual vaults in front of a live audience. The success of our first Hacktivate event drew the attention of a handful of corporates, including Datacom, Orion Health, and among others, which led us to running 7 events of a similar scale. Little did I know that this would be the beginning of my entrepreneurship journey till this day. After one of the events, the Biz Dojo gave us 4 free desks. However, the other 3 people all took on internships and summer jobs. So my friend T and I wondered if we could pay off our student loans in 3 months if we built mobile-friendly websites non-stop through the summer break. So we sat down and wrote our balances at the top of a whiteboard, and after some quick math and a couple of beverages, we determined this to be possible. We registered a company called Summer of Dev because it was just a short-term project, and the next few months were a whirlwind. I met my Michaela, who is now my wife, and T and I had landed enough projects to push us to capacity, often staying at the Biz Dojo until the early hours of the morning. At the time, we were learning and earning more than we were at university, so we decided to unenroll and just go all in on this. Over the next 3 years, we hired a small team and contracted a handful of designers to meet the demand. It wasn't all rosy. We learned what it felt like to be one day away from pay run and not know how we're going to afford that. It's a constant hustle starting a services business. I don't really recommend it, but if you've got it in you, go for it. It took its toll on us, both mentally and physically. Next slide, please. In 2015, we were in the midst of rebuilding the Auckland Art Gallery website with one of our partner businesses, Pixel Fusion, when it became apparent that they were interested in acquiring our team. We jumped at this idea as it meant we could de-risk what we were doing and focus on gaining experience. Next slide, please. Following that, I joined their team to help with business development while taking on running the Startup Grind meetup in Auckland and attempting to build a legal technology SaaS startup. I wish I had started my journey of understanding my whakapapa and leaning into the Māori economy earlier than I did. If the ecosystem was where it is now versus where it was back then, I believe the trajectory of our business and the whole journey would have been completely different if we had actually understood Te Ao Māori values and weaved that into it overall. I'm glad to know what I know now, though. Next slide, please. In 2019, I joined Amazon Web Services and have spent the last 3.5 years working with customers in the early stages of their startup journey. And I've loved every minute of it. My current role is business development, leading the engagement with startup accelerators across Australia and New Zealand. From my point of view, the startup ecosystem in New Zealand has been thriving. Startups globally, though, are facing a challenging and uncertain economic climate, and they need all the help they can to maximise the next chance. Sorry, that's my son in the background, my current startup. Startups need all the help they can to maximise their chances of success over the next 12 to 18 months. I'm over-indexing where I can in my role to support as many early-stage Māori businesses and founders as possible to access the resources they need to support their cloud computing journey. However, looking at the ecosystem as a whole can be daunting at times, and especially in 6 minutes. So I want to focus on an area in a vertical that I'm particularly passionate about. Next slide, please. This is games. As Amber mentioned, the global video game industry is at almost a $250 billion market, exceeding the revenue of the global movie industry and the North American sports industry combined. The New Zealand video game sector is estimated to bring in at least $1 billion in export revenue by 2025. Aotearoa is on the map with some notable exits. Ninja Kiwi was sold to a Swedish gaming firm for $203 million. Weta Digital's technology division was acquired by a game development engine called Unity for $2.3 billion. Wellington-based NZXR has been sold to the Pokemon Go maker, Niantic. And we even see wahine Māori characters inside games like Apex Legends, which is just incredible. Next slide, please. So where are the opportunities in this space? The first one is participation. It's time to change the stereotype of what a gamer is. Take a look at getintogames.nz, and think about ways you can encourage our rangatahi to learn about how to build, not just play games. Companies are already moving some of their operations offshore or assessing a move to Australia to take advantage of their new digital games tax offset, which just launched. If you have any ideas on how to encourage the next wave of startups to stay in New Zealand, I'm all ears. Please reach out to me. I'm almost done. The pool of money that's dedicated into investing in early game startups is still nascent, but it's growing. And I highly recommend you get involved. As games evolve into virtual worlds and online services, the demand for tools and ancillary products needed to build great games is skyrocketing. The highly scalable nature means their potential to generate accelerated growth can translate into immediate increase of high-quality jobs and export revenue without impacting our climate change initiatives. if you or anyone else out there is either building a startup in general or in this space, feel free to come chat to me over kai at lunch. My contact details are on the next slide. Huri noa, e te whare, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora. I'm still buzzing from your welcome. Yeah, so nice to be here. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Mataurangi te Monga, ko Oreti te Moana, ko Pukonway, toku ingoa. So I live here in Wellington on the slopes of Mount Victoria, but I come from Invercargill. I whakapapa back to Southland, and I did a lot of growing up at Oreti Beach and River. So yeah, I'm an economist, currently chief economist at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. So I'm into very big pictures. Is kind of what I've been thinking about for the last few decades. I love the focus that's already come up in this session on the digital economy. I'm really interested in the intersection between the digital economy and the Māori economy. I think that space is full of potential and very keen to talk about it in the pātai later on. So thank you for the invitation to come and speak here today. Very excited to be a very small part of your first national conference on international relations featuring the voice of Māori and youth, because we are certainly living in interesting times. We can all tick that one off. And I think that many of the solutions to the issues that we are currently facing into can be found in that Māori worldview. And in the hearts and minds of young people. I'm really supportive of the courageous young people out there protesting climate change and also agitating to lower the voting age in New Zealand to 16. Full power to those people. I've been asked to speak on how Te Pūtea Mātua, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, embraces our Indigenous history and heritage and applies Te Ao Māori in what we do. I must say I'm new to the Reserve Bank, Te Pūtea Mātua. I've been there almost 2 months, so I'm settling into all of this. But a strong focus on Te Ao Māori was a big part of the attraction for me to come and work at Te Pūtea Mātua in the first place. Because the more that I personally learn about the Te Ao Māori, or the Māori worldview, the more I think it holds important solutions for the challenging economic times that we live in. So let me start with some insights into the Māori economy that come from the paper that Te Pūtea Mātua wrote in conjunction with Burl a couple of years ago. So tangata whenua in our country still face economic adversity relative to the population as a whole. So Māori make up about 17% of our population, but they earn less than 9% of our national income. So 17% population, 9% of the income pie. That is a big difference. So Māori in general are down the wrong end of the income distribution, systematically down that end here in Aotearoa. So of course with lower incomes comes lower savings rates, lower financial wealth, greater financial hardship and adversity. So the reason for that, just on the surface at least, is that Māori tend to be employed in low-wage jobs, and also across Māori, the unemployment is typically persistently higher than it is across the general population. These outcomes have been generations in the making, so I really hope that we are part of the cohort that turns that disparity around in a much shorter time. And more positively, the Māori economy, it's clearly growing. It's becoming more diverse, and it's increasingly being recognised as an opportunity. And in the culture and wellbeing space, Māori are just increasingly contributing to our economy and to the cultural well-being of all of us. And to some extent, we are witnessing a renaissance, which I would call a good start in sorting out these issues. So Aotearoa is slowly embracing the richness that our diverse cultures bring, and that fills me with hope for the future. Now, in terms of our legislative task at Te Pūtea Mātua, it's to enable the economic well-being and prosperity of all New Zealanders. So that's why we are increasingly talking about these issues. But it's not just talking about the Māori economy, it's about embracing Te Ao Māori in all that we do. Because as I said, I think there are many solutions to the problems that we face within that rich heritage. In particular, the strong focus on people, tangata and the whenua, the land, is so important right now. So we must reinvigorate the sort of long-held connections within the Māori worldview to environmental sustainability and social coherence. I think that Māori heritage gives us a head start on addressing those issues. And, this is not just in an academic sort of way. We need to live and breathe Te Ao Māori in much of what we do. So at Te Pūtea Mātua, we're trying to harness the knowledge of both our post-colonial society and Te Ao Māori to establish and maintain a long-term vision to what we do. We've also refreshed our values through the lens of Te Ao Māori. And we also use the Te Ao Māori framework to describe the purpose and interconnectedness of our work. So we use the legend of Tāne Mahuta to describe the New Zealand financial system and our role within that system. And our Te Ao Māori strategy is also helping to inform our policy programs. So we're using it to broaden our external stakeholder engagements and to grow our internal cultural capabilities. And you can read all about this in a speech that Adrian Orr, our governor, gave a couple of weeks ago called Why We Embrace Te Ao Māori. Let me end just by saying that, we don't do this because it's kind of the cool thing to do all of a sudden. We do it because we want to be true to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, both the English and Te Reo versions of the treaty. But we also do it because it works. It brings us together and it allows us to connect across the bank in ways that wouldn't be possible just using Pākehā or Western frames. I'm nearly finished. Just to finish, just to sort of emphasise the point that this works, I did a course a few years back called Ruku Ao, and it taught me about leadership from a Māori perspective and using marae-based technologies and whakatau as a basis for engagement and bringing people together to work. So it taught me to speak from my source, what I truly believe and what I know to be true and what I want to bring. It taught me to be authentic and it taught me to be honest. And it taught me, how to sort of bring people together to achieve good things in an authentic way. And that course, which was run out of Toi Whakaari, was by far the most powerful piece of professional development that I have ever done and will ever do. And my career has absolutely blossomed since then, not to mention my mental health and my sense of life well-being. It has truly been transformative. So I believe that we can achieve the same sorts of transition both within the Reserve Bank and across Aotearoa, and across our economy and across our society as a whole. So, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I really look forward to the conversation with you all.
And we'd like to welcome to the podium Bob Fisher. Kia ora.
Kia ora, kia ora. Tēnā tātou katoa, ko waiau he uri ahau no Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairoa, no Ngāti Parau me Ngāti Whakauwe hoki. Ko Rob Fisher tāku ingoa. It was 1997 and my mother had just purchased a compact Presario 2200 and she did it with a high interest loan from GE Finance. I learnt that afterwards. I remember the logo turning up with the computer. And to a goofy kind of South Auckland teenager, it was just a whole new world of possibilities, right? I could go online, I could download MP3s, I could play first-person shooters, I could just connect with a whole new world, and it was exciting. For my mother, however, it was a whole other thing, right? It was an opportunity for me to connect and hopefully turn on and spark an interest with technology. She didn't know what the future held, but she was confident that if she gave me the tools, the opportunity to connect with it, that I'd be smart enough and figure out how to do the rest. She didn't try to determine the outcome. She had no detailed agenda. She wouldn't even know what skills I was going to need. She just trusted me to do the rest. She certainly wouldn't expect that in 2022 I'd be standing here in front of all you brilliant people and be talking about that computer that nearly made us broke and how transformative it has been for me and her mokopuna, which I feel bad about, by the way. My partner asked me, I'll bring our daughter, Nawa, she's 8 months. And I was like, there's no way there's going to be any babies here. So I feel real bad seeing the I did that. I sent her a message saying, oh, there's a baby here, ka aroha. Sorry, that can't count for my 6 minutes. So in one generation, her hunch, her vision had taken me from 13 kids in a 3-bedroom state house in Hoturoa to me here today. I've travelled the world. I'm incredibly blessed to have been involved in startups, worked with some of the world's iconic brands and just had a massive amount of opportunities, to be honest. So every entrepreneur executive in the industry will tell you, Māori are grossly underrepresented in our sector. It is everywhere. Oh.
Only because you're tall, my friend.
Oh, can you hear me? Oh, yeah. Sorry. Is that better? Rawe ka aroha. So for us as a sector,
Did I turn it off?
I'll just lean. Is that better? I don't want to drop it. Cool. I said for us as a sector, for any executive or founder or anyone in this industry knows we are grossly underrepresented as Māori in the industry. We are locked out of our fastest growing, highest paying, second largest export. For us as a sector that thrives on innovation and creativity, I believe it's a missed opportunity for the ideas, the diversity, the creative thinking, the different perspectives. That's what we look for in tech. That's what we are thriving for. It's how people like myself look to differentiate. Increasing participation for Māori in tech, for me, is the biggest single opportunity for the Māori economy. Imagine local and global tech startups that train and employ Māori based out of places like Ngaruawahia, Ahipara. Why can't the next Silicon Valley be in Otaki? There is no good reason. Why not? An exciting opportunity that is resilient and future-focused. What my mother taught me is we don't start with the dream, we don't try colour in all those details, we just create a platform and we create an opportunity. Far too often, and as a government and as an industry, we try to do this. We worry about our timeframes, our quarterly and annual business cycles, election cycles, KPIs, the fact that we're getting some public pressure on our ESG and our diversity targets. What we do is we try to define what good looks like and we then try to fund it. I'll bring it back to my mother. She didn't have a time frame, she didn't have a plan, she just trusted that I would do the rest. What I'm saying here is not rocket science, and I'm pretty sure the Diplosphere people are probably saying, I thought he would say something far more complex than that. I was asked to speak on where I thought the opportunities for Māori and trade and tech and success were. The answer for me is really basic. It's participation. The growth strategy should be focused on providing a pathway for our people to learn, explore, and engage with STEM. I'm confident, like my mother was, they will do the rest. Being more specific and detailed, I believe these efforts should be focused on kohanga and kura Māori. My tamariki grew up in the Māori education system. The only time I've ever seen a vendor turn up, an initiative or an investment, is when the whānau have arranged it. And statistically, you've got to be really lucky to have a whānau member in the tech sector. We should be pouring resource into providing access and training for whānau, kaiako, and tauira, and kohanga and kura Māori. I think if we do this, I don't know when, I don't know how, but I'm confident we would eventually see a real shift in the Māori economy and all those statistics that we're craving, all the stuff we want as outcomes. It just might take a while, and it might not be in our timeframes. And I don't think it'll look like anything we imagine right now. Beyond this, and more importantly to me, I believe creating more digital confidence and fluency in tamariki and rangatahi Māori from the Māori education medium will play a massive role in the ongoing revitalisation of te reo Māori and expanding the mātauranga continuum. I'm confident that if we put these tools, these digital tools in the hands of young innovators and creators with a strong upbringing in te ao Māori, they will create new digital worlds in ways we cannot possibly imagine today. The opportunities are limitless and exciting. Our tamariki and rangatahi will come up with far better ideas than I could ever dare try and predict with you here today. And my mother taught me better than to limit people by trying to define their future. Nā mihi nui ki a koutou mo tō aro mai I tēnei iahi. Nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā ra tātou katoa.
My apologies there as aroha mai for getting in there with the microphone. I wanted to make sure everyone could hear you for what you had to say. Your pātai was, your kōrero was on point, everything. So I've also kia ora. Thank you, everybody. Apologies, we have not been able to receive a video from Tanya, so I'll just take a little moment to speak from the heart. So kia ora, you've heard a little bit about what I've come through over the last 2 decades. I was born to a solo parent in Onehunga. She did everything she could to provide me opportunity. Honestly, the career that I've had didn't exist when I was yet young, nor did it exist, I guess, inside my industry. She instilled in me a love for education. It might also be something around loving a growth mindset, making sure that I could continue through and forward. Reality is I shouldn't, with where I came from, be here, standing here. None of the opportunities I had was because it was laid before me. It was because I had to strive and fight and climb. So I, for the last decade, have been running APAC region's largest privately held data centre. Crazy. I started in film. I moved into tech. I have now started a startup to help create worlds, to empower creativity and to empower voices. It's important to me when I would go out and try and find rangatahi because I had jobs available in the film creative sector, I couldn't find them. And so I think the conversation around education and opportunity and access is really, really important. There's a lot of mahi going on right now to uplift our communities in the digital space. I too am very excited to see where this could go. And that's a little bit about me. I'm here to empower creativity through technology. It isn't to take away, it's to push us forward. And my hope is that we can all together empower through kora kaupapa skills and other spaces. It's important. I too have had to push to get into those spaces myself. So kia ora, hopefully that's a little bit about me. And I just wanted to acknowledge what was spoken today. So kia ora, Shane. You started your entrepreneurial journey, and I love how you started in the university space and then diverted. That happens a fair bit when you're in the comp sci space. Loving the fact that you are advocating for our gaming industry. You mentioned that 3% of game developers are Māori. That's an incredible amount of world build, but also IP. So when I talk about IP, I'm talking about the technical space behind it, building of the technology, but also the worlds that we build. Imagine if that game could go into multiple platform of places. There is a lot to be said about taking our IP to the world and about data sovereignty. I'll keep it contained for now. I'll let you ask those questions. And also just acknowledging around the game industry, there are subsidies that are happening in Australia, and 58% of our game spaces are looking at moving, which I would love for us to have a conversation at a point like how we can keep that here. And those amazing, incredible people. Paul, kia ora for your kōrero. and welcome to the Reserve Bank. I love that you're there, and also I appreciate what you spoke from. When you talked about being going through your leadership training, speaking from your source, authenticity, honesty, bringing people together to collectively achieve something. That is how, through technology, we can do the same, and through trading with the world internationally, taking our stories, taking ourselves out to the world. So kia ora. Thank you, and I just love that there's a live and breathe Te Ao Māori inside the Reserve Bank. And to Rob, you got me, man. You literally said everything that I had hoped that would be said today. So kia ora. The opportunities, the tools, the access, we have been locked out. I never saw myself. And so that's why it's really important. If you can see it, you can be it. So that's why it's important to get into those spaces. And I know that's what we've been trying to do in this. And I just wanted to acknowledge as well, selling your company is pretty huge. Kia ora. So I guess this is handing over to the floor. If we have any pātai for our panel here, I can see we have some wonderful wahine at the back there. And also kia ora, my first time doing this. Appreciate you all. And kia ora, Maddie.
Hello. This is perhaps a question for Shane and Rob. Regarding the skills gap, and Paul called out the 17% versus 9% in wages. What is being done in the tech space to, right now, today, information that folks can share back to help bridge that tech skills gap?
From my perspective, not enough at the moment, and I think we're probably targeting the wrong areas. I'll give you an example. It's really hard to find kids who graduate from certain schools, certain backgrounds, because we're expecting them to have gone to university, right, and finished school, and all those sorts of things. So I think as a sector, we need to be starting far younger with where we're putting effort, when we're injecting resource, because waiting for them at 20 is probably is not the answer, right? Expecting them, trying to give away these scholarships, and I work for PwC, I'm a partner there. We're far too guilty of giving too many scholarships away to kids from King's College, Scots College. We need to be far more granular and start far more early. So my ask for us as a sector is start thinking about how we are targeting tamariki working in schools and actually trying to inspire them. I think to your point, seeing people that look and sound like Amber, that's really important. Showing them that people like her can thrive in an industry is a big part of just creating that mental blueprint to participating, being part of these careers and all the stuff that comes with it. So I think until we do that, and everything I said in my speech, everything is tactical until that point. Everything is a plaster on the actual problem that is going to take a long time and require a lot more long-term thinking about how we create and how we shift those numbers in the right direction, because otherwise we're just going to be playing with the 4 and 5% in the tech industry, and we're going to be complaining about it in 10 years' time. So sorry, I don't have a great answer there. I just think we just need to be really honest about that.
Yeah, just building on that. So Amazon globally have ambitious goals to train, I think it's in the tens of millions of people for free in cloud computing before 2025. And so some of those goals have flowed down to Aotearoa, and I've been part of launching one program, and there's multiple other things going on, but the one in particular that I'm keen to reference is called AWS Restart. And so we launched this program last year in collaboration with an organisation called Unitech up in Auckland, and it's now sort of being rolled out across New Zealand. But the whole purpose of that program is focusing on retraining, and in particular Māori and Pacifica, and it's more focused at that kind of level of like displaced jobs out of the COVID response. And so it's not necessarily solving that earlier kind of high school and rangatahi space, but it is a cohort of 25 people every 3 months going through this program. And off the back of it, they are offered jobs and interviews at partners of AWS, such as like Datacom and those types of organizations. So we're seeing some good success with that. I think just like you're right, we really need to focus as early as we possibly can. Like there's this one story that comes to mind where I was speaking at I got porwhiri onto a marae in Hikuroa in Hastings, and it was a kura. There was about 40 people there, 40 kids, and I was just sharing about my career, and it's about providing awareness and inspiration to the next generation, and I explained that it's games like Fortnite and Netflix are built on top of Amazon Web Services, and there was this 8-year-old girl who asked a question. She was like, so I could build games as a career, like I could build games and make money doing that, and I just said yeah, like as long as you focus on learning and understanding the skills required to do that. And I could just see her sitting there like rubbing her chin, and I was just like, man, we need to be doing this like all the time and telling so it's because awareness is the main thing. Yeah.
Sorry, I realised I probably just jumped out the gun there. I don't want to whakaiti the efforts of a number, Tuputoa, our wānanga. There are a number of amazing places doing phenomenal effort, but I come back to the tactical nature of it, because we don't think in longer terms, but there are a lot of people, a lot of groups doing a lot of good things out there, so I didn't want to whakaiti that.
Yeah, great, cool. I just can't help having a little chat about this, and just to bring it even a bit wider and say that our education system historically, at least, has not done a particularly good job at giving people the skills that they need to get good work in the labour market. So I think the issue that we're talking about here is sort of symptomatic of an education system that hasn't done particularly well. And another point I'll call out is that across our schools there's huge variance. We've got some really good schools or students coming out of our schooling system, and we've got some kids who have totally been let down. Like every school in the public sector needs to be strong and to show kids what the possibilities are out there, and our universities need to get better at sort of giving them the skills that are in demand in the labour market, instead of we tend to import skills that we need instead of growing them, home growing them. So yeah, there's a big mahi in this space, in my opinion.
Kia ora. Kia ora whapātai. My brother, go here, then I'm going to go to you, my brother, then I'm going to go to you, then I'm going to go to you. Kia ora. So it'll be around here. Sorry if anyone else is out there. Kia ora. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou i ngā kaipānera mō koutou kōrero. Ka noho reo rua taku pātai. So taku pātai, he āhuatanga e kitea whānuitia ana e tātou i roto i te ao matihiko, i roto i te ao hangarau, ko te whānakotanga o ngā taonga Māori e te ringa rā wekeweke. He hao koutou nā whakaaro, e noho haumaru ai e manakitia e tiakina, hoki ngā taonga Māori i roto i te ao, Pākihi, i roto i te ao Pākihi, i runga i te rorohiko, kia noho ai ngā pūtea mai, kia noho tapu ngā taonga Māori mō te Māori. Ngā pūtea ka hoki mai aua taonga, ka haere ki te Māori, ka haere ki te ringa toi, ka haere ki te hapori Māori. Nō reira ka whakapākeatia taku. So one thing that we're seeing a lot these days in technology is the inappropriate use of taonga Māori, cultural misappropriation, and how do we protect Indigenous taonga, how do we protect traditional knowledge? In the gaming industry, for example, how do we make sure that cultural depictions are used appropriately, but also to make sure that these taonga are not mistreated or misused?
Kia ora for the pātai.
Ngā mihi. That's... I don't have a great answer right now because I haven't done that thinking around direct solutions for that, but acknowledging it's a problem. So I can't help but think when I look at a Silver Lake acquisition of the All Blacks and the fact that a lot of our cultural IP is tied up with that, with the game, with the sport, with the brand that it is Māori. And my first thought when I saw that, because we had a lot to do with the transaction, if I'm being honest, is how are we going to ring fence the misappropriation of Māori culture around that? How are we going to make sure our advertising and alignment of our values is thought after with commercial sponsors, commercial partners, how it's being used, when it's being used, all those sorts of things that I think as a globalised economy are things that we are going to have to think through. I think it's always been an issue. I think with advertising and marketing and things like that, we can see tangible issues and directly go and engage or interact with those parties that are doing that. But I think in a world where we've got streaming, where we're so globalised now, where everything is done, like you say, the gaming platforms, it is so distributed now and is going to create a whole new set of challenges that I don't necessarily have the answer for, if I'm being honest with you. But I think, I'll bring it back to the cope-up of the day. I think a values-based approach to thinking about solutions, a values-based approach to thinking about how we ring fence, I suppose, or have some rangatiratanga over our cultural IP is going to be one of the next big challenges. And for any young people in the room, anyone who's at university, I think there is a great opportunity to create some real innovative thought leaders in this space, because frankly I don't think we have the answers. I haven't seen any anyway, so don't have a great answer for you there, bro, but tēnei taku whakaaro anyway.
It's a great question. I also don't have a great answer, but I do have a couple of anecdotes. I mentioned in my talk, there was a character now in Apex Legends, which is based on Māori wahine, and the first implementation of that was done very poorly, and and we spoke up from New Zealand and made sure that was heard, and they went back and consulted all the right parties required in New Zealand, which I don't know the full picture of that, but it'd be worth looking into that process as well and see how they actually overcame it. The other one is there's a startup accelerator up in the Waikato called Kokore, which I think Amber's been through that program, and there's also it's fantastic and we love working with them. There's a startup in there at the moment whose name has just shot straight out of my head, but you could take a look at their cohort online. They are focused on building a blockchain solution to ensure that there is less of that appropriation, and there is a kind of auditable kind of pathway around some of this knowledge and assets. And so, watch the space. Have a look at that Kokore accelerator. Yeah.
I'll add a third, not particularly well. I don't have a great answer for a great question either. Except to say, I have my sort of reservations about the patent and copyright system globally, which are designed to protect intellectual property and taonga. I think they're moving in the right direction, but I think it's a slow process. My only sort of thought would be, think hard about what it means to ring fence these taonga and lawyer up in this space and go hard in protecting them. I think internationally, the kind of thought stream is changing around. There's a much greater awareness about inappropriate cultural appropriation and the like, and just ride that as hard as we can to protect the stuff would be my advice.
I might just add a little bit to that, and I just want to. Was it Maui and the NFTs? Yes, kia ora, Maui and the NFTs. They're looking at that. In the screen space, this has been a challenge for ourselves. When I talk about screen, it's TV, film, and gaming, so multimedia. This is something that I raised with Ministry of Culture and Heritage and with our Film and Television Commission, because as we go forward, we'll look at the new technology like photogrammetry, which takes imagery of our spaces and places. And for me, in my company, I will be led through the values, but that doesn't mean that I can necessarily impose that on others. And so I feel like it comes down to maybe a more of a legal framework to help protect our lands. Because I can't speak to the big studios to do that, but I can do it myself. Another thing I'm looking at is more equitable contracts around looking after how creativity is shown and seen, which means as a producer myself, I will have written something. I pass that through and down to other artists to infuse their creativity. How is that benefiting them in a financial means? So For me, it's a big learning journey I'm about to go on, is like, how do we protect our IP, but also how do we create profitability in a sense of bringing that back to our communities, so that others who have more, education in this space, that we can actually be able to engage them as well, those who can speak in the legal framework. And it's all new for me. But kia ora for that question. Kia ora for your pātai. Thank you. Ooh. So I had 3. So it was you, my bro? Oh, it's been answered. Kia ora. For you? You're okay? You've been answered? And then we had the wahine behind. Kia ora. And was that also...
Kia ora.
Told 5 minutes? Last question. Last question now.
Cool. Kia ora. So Hine Pounamu, she's a rangatahi from Kaitahu. She wrote a report on how we need to shift our focus from specific job roles into skills focus, because in the future AI is getting so smart that we're not really going to have coders. So how are you guys going to prepare for all of those job losses, especially if you want a lot of Māori to get into tech and then all of a sudden there's just no more jobs because of AI?
Kia ora. I don't mind speaking to that, but I'll let you guys speak too.
Yeah. From my view on that is the industry actually has dealt with that for quite a long time. Like, if you think about the shifts and the constant evolution in the tech industry, we are constantly having to rethink about what, in most industries might be a 5 or 10 year skills-based horizon, to think about retraining and pathways and getting ahead of that curve. In the tech industry and the big vendors like the bro over here, that they are as good as they are reskilling and training as they are creating cloud computing solutions. And I think, so for us, that's probably not a confronting question, if I'm being honest, because we've been living with that for, since the tech industries began, because of the pace of it. So I do think, though, we are certainly seeing more and more use of technology to help solve that problem. So exactly like you say, thinking skills-based and actually using technology to develop training pathways, to develop customised training pathways. You'll see a hell of a lot of that in the tech companies going on, because they just have to constantly stay ahead of that curve. So it's a great question. I think a lot of the other industries could learn, though, from the tech industry in that space, because they're just constantly dealing with it.
Kia ora. Can I just add... this is about the future of work, and it's true that the job-eating robots are coming. Well, actually, they're here already, and technology does destroy jobs, but it also creates jobs, and historically it has tended to create more jobs than it destroys. But they're different jobs. They require a different skill mix of earlier jobs. So the challenge for us here is really around that lifelong learning and keeping our skills sharp. So that we can sort of ride that wave of new technology. Because technology, it's to be embraced. Like, it's not something to fear. It's something that is going to improve, our well-being long term. But keeping skills fresh and up to date is an essential part of that vision.
Yeah, I think they've covered what I was going to say. But I think, purely it's just educate as early as possible and do it often. And if you see a gap where a skill isn't being taught, make that known and try and help solve it.
Kia ora. Okay, hold it then. For me, I'm going to go closer. Kia ora. For me, when we talk about AI, who's building the AI? So I wish to find rangatahi who have the capability, the mindset, the ability to do the technical job, because they're building the new technology themselves. And if we are a part of that building of the world, be it the technology or whatever that creates, the platform it might build, then we are empowering ourselves and our people. I want to know that when I'm engaging with a piece of technology, it isn't at the detriment to somebody else. So we can build that framework ourselves, and at the moment we're hopefully getting the opportunities to do so. So those skill sets can go in many different places. I never thought I would be standing here talking in a political sense. So you can evolve as you grow with your career. It just gives us more doors and more opportunities to walk through. So kia ora. Thank you. So I acknowledge time. So I will pass over to our friend here. Kia ora. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I get you to keep the applause going for our panellists, also chaired by Amber, Shane Tracy O'Connell, Paul Conway, Rob Fisher. There were some great insights there and also some great one-liners. I wrote them all down. I've got 4 pages worth of notes, so thanks for that. And also great to get contact details so I can interview you on my RNZ show. So I'll be emailing you soon. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Lunch is ready, folks. Now, just by way of administration, it is 20 past 1, so we are due back for Sir Ian Taylor's keynote at 2. So again, I'm going to encourage you, harai te me ke horo te kai, me ata kai, engari me horo te haere, me horo te hoki mai. So we'll get you to go quickly lunch and then come back quickly. Again, making your way back here at 1:55. We're going to hit bang on 2 o'clock. Ka bai? Any issues? No? Good. Bless the food. Amen. Kia ora tātou.